Well, we've fixed it. We pitched it, but we've still got stuff to say about Star Trek because we love it. Cue that intro.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Mirror Movie Universe podcast. It's another episode with your pals, Nate and Dan, and we've added Graham this time. It's another Graham-isode for a special format. That's right. As you heard in the intro, Dan was talking about how this is an episode where we talk about our unabridged love for something. In this case, it's Star Trek franchise. And other than trying to fix it or pitch a new one, we're just going to talk about all the things that we absolutely adore about this thing. We're going to talk through some standard questions about if you're new to it, where you should start, what the most underrated thing in the franchise is. So across the aisle and across the country from me are two gentlemen that will be answering these questions as we go through. We're going to start with our first one, and that's the best place to start. I think we'll kick it off with Dan on the first bit of this. Dan, I'm new to Star Trek. I don't know who Captain Kirkard is. Tell me where I should start. How should I begin this absolute journey? What should I start with?
Here's the thing, Nate and Graham. I have seen this question asked in differing formats all over Star Trek fan groups on social media. And it always is like the same thing. My girlfriend or husband or dad or postman or brother or cousin or coworker or whatever has decided to let me show them one thing from Star Trek. One episode, one movie, one thing from Star Trek. There's 840 hours of Star Trek and counting at this point, and with all the movies and TV shows and everything. So where do you start? And the answer invariably falls into one of two categories when people answer that question. The first is make them start at the beginning and watch absolutely everything, no matter what, which is a terrible answer, and I hope it's not what you two have said. And the other one is picking episodes, different episodes, and that's what I have done. My pick for the best place to start, if you are new to Star Trek, is a Star Trek The Next Generation episode from season 5 called Disaster. It's a very run-of-the-mill episode. Basically, the ship is having a disaster, and all the different characters are caught in a different part of the ship. It's the Poseidon Adventure on the Enterprise. Picard is stuck in the turbo lift with a bunch of kids. Riker and Data go down to engineering. Worf delivers Keiko's baby, which is hilarious.
I was wondering if this is this episode, because this is the one where Worf is stuck in 10 forward. Yes. And Keiko O'Brien is having the kid, and he's like, "You may now commence labor," because he does not understand. Yeah, okay. No, it's a good character episode.
You may now push. Yeah. I love it.
Yeah.
You get O'Brien,
which must be hilarious for you because you've had two kids at this point, Dan. Yes. And Graham, this will occur, with you and your wife, pretty darn soon. So this is a fun episode to intro. Sure. Yes. Yeah. Continue.
And you get O'Brien and Troy and Ro on the bridge, trying to figure out who's in command and everything else. You get all sorts of different stuff happening. You get Geordi and Crusher trapped in a cargo bay, and they're trying to keep it from exploding. All sorts of great stuff. Here's why this is the best place to start. First of all, Star Trek is very episodic. So you can jump into this without needing to know anybody or anything that's going on. Some of the bigger episodes, like Best of Both Worlds or In the Pale Moonlight, you kind of have to know some stuff before you get there. This one, you just jump in. 2, if they do like it, it is the perfect springboard to everything else. Because you can ask them, like, what did you like about it? And they say, oh, my favorite part was that guy O'Brien and that lady on the bridge arguing. And you're like, let's watch Deep Space Nine. Oh, my favorite part was Data. He was pretty cool. If you like Data, I think that you would also like Spock. That's a great, let's jump on to that. Or, hey, I think that I'd like to see more of this. Let's watch Star Trek more Next Generation. That sounds fantastic. And number 3, if they don't like it, that's fine. it's just a run-of-the-mill episode. It's not there are four lights. It's not, the one where Cisco has the thing with the guy and it's a fake. It's just
that's in the Pale Moonlight. You said the title earlier.
That's in the Pale Moonlight.
Yeah.
Okay.
Messed it up. Look at that. But it's just an episode. So there's no skin off your back if they don't like it. It's just like, okay, that's it. No worries. Wash our hands of it, move on. Thoughts, gentlemen?
I'm interested that you chose a Next Generation episode and not.
So am I.
Yeah, and not a film, not an original series episode. Because I was thinking about if I'm going to choose an episode, I have to choose something in Deep Space Nine. Do I want to do that? I don't know. Because Deep Space Nine is my favorite, and stakes are high. You got to start with the best. I'm interested. If I was going to, I had this thought about my friends, and Disaster is a great episode in Next Generation, where they're like solving a crisis and everyone's doing their own stuff and it introduces the characters. But there's one that does it better. It's not how I would introduce characters, so I'm not going to spend more than like 30 seconds on it. But there's one called Cause and Effect, where like the Enterprise just blows up in the first 30 seconds.
Yes.
And the rest of the episode is a time loop of like the last day before it blows up. And it similarly introduces characters, but I like the concept of what you're going for. I like the concept. I don't know.
Thank you. Graham, what do you think? Am I way off base?
No, I don't think so. I think that's a good way to look at it. I can't really speak more to it than that because TNG is the Star Trek series that I have seen like the least of. I've seen Best of Both Worlds, and that's really it.
Yeah,
I
gotta fix that.
I have like, yeah, I know I need to fix that, but I have like no experience with TNG. I get the Four Lights reference. I've seen some of the bigger episodes, but I haven't seen this one. I haven't seen Cause and Effect either, despite Nate raving about it forever.
I like it a lot.
Yes, I know, and I would love it. I know I would love it. I just haven't seen it. So I can't say any more than that, just because to me, TNG is the biggest part of Star Trek that I haven't experienced.
No, that's fair. That's fair. And maybe this is the perfect intro episode for you getting into TNG, because it's a dangerous proposition, man. They're like, you try to get someone into TNG and you're like, let's start at season 1, and that's a bad idea.
I know that's a bad idea because you guys have probably heard Dad rant about how he was so excited when TNG was going to start airing, and then season 1 happened and it sucked and he never went back.
Yep. So, it's rough around the edges, and that's putting it very, very generously. So I know that you're a Deep Space Nine guy, Graham. Do you pick a Deep Space Nine episode for your intro? Like, what do you like? You're gonna introduce your wife, who I don't think has seen much Star Trek at all, to Star Trek. Where do you start?
Not much. I think the most Star Trek she's had is a few episodes of the original series she doesn't remember, and me showing her Voyage home after watching the podcast episode.
Yeah.
That was how I got her to watch Voyage home.
Nice.
I would do, I think, a 2-parter. And I really told her this because I wanted to do a DS9 episode. And of course, my mind goes to In the Pale Moonlight, because In the Pale Moonlight it's
the best there is. I mean,
yeah, it's the best Star Trek episode ever, in my opinion. Like, it's fantastic. There's stuff you need to know, though. Like, mostly, you can hand wave the explanation for the Dominion War. You can't hand wave the Garrick stuff, and Garrick is one of my favorite characters. So you miss out on all the character stuff that happens with him if you start there, because by then, like, everything about him is known, basically. I would do Trouble with Tribbles, followed by Trial and Tribulations.
Oh,
good.
So for the uninitiated viewers, the first one, that's an original series episode. And then the second one is a Deep Space Nine episode where they go back in time to the original series episode. That's really fun.
I feel like it shows what Star Trek started as, and then it follows through with what it morphed into in the Next Generation era, and then that can bleed into TNG, Voyager, DS9, the original series. I don't think it's easy to do just one episode, at least from the episodes that I No, which is mostly DS9 and Voyager. Like I don't remember a lot of the original series. I haven't seen much of TNG. Um, so there's not a DS9 episode to me that shouts like this is a good way to introduce Star Trek to somebody. Besides Trial and Tribulations, because that was the first episode of DS9 that I actually watched.
Same,
I
actually.
I watched that one first, then I went back and watched the whole series, and then I did that again and again and again. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a fun way to play with the world that Star Trek creates.
Yeah,
And you see how everything evolves when you do the jump forward and then you jump back. Like you just see how so much has changed and how so much has stayed the same. It's just a chef's kiss. It really is.
oh yeah. I love this. I think it's better than my idea. I love this because in the Deep Space Nine episode, when they go back in time, they're making comments about the characters, about how Kirk is a legend and Spock is handsome, and how like one of the Deep Space Nine characters who's hundreds of years old, Jadzia Dax, apparently had an affair with Dr. McCoy back in the day, and they're talking about these characters like you probably were just talking about the characters when you watched the episode right before. That's a really fun activity. I like that. That's good. That's good. Dan, what do you think about
Here's
this?
why I love that, because I think those are the two most fun episodes from both of those series. Trouble with Tribbles is by far the most fun original series episode. It's just it's not corny, it's just fun and exciting, and like Kirk Shatner just hams it up with the whole like, oh, but they don't like you. I love it. It is so fun, and that is the most fun Deep Space Nine episode too. Trials and Tribulations. Like, entertainment should be fun and entertaining, and it can be dark and grim and gritty and everything else that Deep Space Nine does so well. But it is so incredibly fun in both of those episodes, and that is a great way to get somebody hooked. Absolutely love it. But we come down to Nate.
Oh, yes.
You have something better, good sir?
I'm not sure, but I'll tell you where you shouldn't start with Star Trek. You shouldn't start where I started. My first episode of Star Trek that I can remember as a little kid, like I was like 3 or 4. We had it on like taped off a regular TV. The first Star Trek that I remember watching and asking like, who are these characters? Who's this guy? Is a crappy middle of the road original series episode called The Paradise Syndrome, where Kirk goes down to a planet that's inhabited entirely by Native Americans, because of course it is. It's the 60s. And Kirk loses his memory and gets assimilated into this culture. And because he knows things from space, being a spaceman, they treat him like a god, and there's a romance, and it's a run-of-the-mill Star Trek episode from the 60s. And it is also pretty darn offensive. I would not recommend starting with that one. There are episodes that I love, but either too heavy, or they take characters out of their element and they don't introduce them well. Because when I think of the best episodes ever, like Duet and In the Pale Moonlight, which we've talked about before, like they're not like watchable if you don't know who the people are. I was thinking about Far Beyond the Stars for a little while, because that's the one where Cisco goes back in time to be he doesn't go back in time. He has a vision that he's a sci-fi writer in the 50s, and he writes Star Trek. And he can't get his stories published because he's an African-American author. And it's a very powerful episode, but it doesn't tell you anything about Star Trek. And so I have fallen back on a very, very basic answer, which I believe is still the right answer. And that is watching Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. Because it's just the most basic. It introduces these characters to you. Everyone has a little lovely moment, with some exceptions. We talked about that in a previous episode. It's funny, it's suspenseful, and it introduces these characters to you in an Earth-based setting with technology, so it bridges the gap a little bit. It's the Starbucks Frappuccino answer to this question. It's very basic. However, I think it's still the right answer. What do you think, gentlemen?
considering I almost said that, I have to agree with you. Like I didn't. I almost said that until I thought of the tripled episodes, because that's what I did. Like that's how I introduced my wife to Star Trek, basically.
Yeah.
So like you're not wrong. That is a very good starting point. Very, like you said, kind of basic and all of that, but still, like it's basic because it's right.
It's the safe bet,
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like
It
these fun
is.
characters with a fun, wacky, silly sci-fi plot.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is
If
just like I was
about it,
saying about the
yeah.
episodes. That is by far the most fun movie. It is entertaining. It is fun. You know
Mhm.
that they're going to get the whales and that they're going to save them and stuff. Like I have no doubt in my mind from the opening thing, but it's still so fun to watch and they make it so entertaining. And I mean, we talked about it. The jokes still land to this day. Yeah,
Mhm.
that is a fantastic place to start. And it's an easy place to
Mhm.
say, like, do you want to watch more? And then they say, like, wait, why are they in this thing? I thought that they were in like a ship called the Enterprise. And you go, well, haha, let's watch the Search for Spock. That'll answer that question. Oh,
And then
I
you go
love that.
backwards through the rest of the movies. The problem with this is that I don't know where I'd go next. Um, do I go backwards and start back at Wrath of Khan? I don't know, but I Voyage Home is my pick. It's like we all love it. It is. I think the two of you, it's your favorite Star Trek movie, yeah, for
Yeah.
both of you,
It's
or
my favorite one. I love it to death. It's
okay.
also the only one from the original six that I actually like.
Shame. Wrath of Khan is my favorite out of those, and
Wow.
but I understand. Um, uh, I love it. I love it to death. It is, if not the best, one of the best. Not all Star Trek is loved by everybody, though.
No,
And we're gonna go around the horn again. There's some things that we personally love that we're probably going to get murdered by the internet for saying. Dan, what is the most underrated Star Trek in your opinion out of the whole damn thing?
I have to give a shout out to one of the new shows that's airing. I think they're in their fifth season. It's Star Trek Lower Decks, which is absolutely hilarious and poignant, and they have fantastic characters. And I think that it gets overlooked by fans for a couple of reasons. One, I think that people think it's animation and they don't want to watch it, which is stupid, but whatever. And I think that the other reason that people don't want to watch it is because they think that they have to be like super nerds to get the jokes, which you do not. They make it funny. And yes, there are references, and yes, there are call outs and callbacks to things, but not, you don't have to be like so deep in the lore to understand that. And the jokes come flying fast and furious. I absolutely adore it. It is funny. It is so good. The characters are really compelling and engaging, and it shows something that Star Trek has not shown up until this point. Star Trek is always about the command crew, the chief this, the chief that, the chief doctor, the chief engineer, the captain, the first officer doing their stuff. And this is fantastic because it changes the dynamic to show the lower decks, the people who make the ship work. There was one episode in Star Trek The Next Generation that did this in season 7 called The Lower Decks that was phenomenal, which showed some characters that we had seen in the background for years and gave them the spotlight. And it was incredible to see. And I know that we love these shows so much. It is kind of ridiculous that the command crew is always doing stuff and always knows everything and is always reciting poetry and in a play and playing jazz and everything else. And so it's great to take the focus and just be like, there are other people on the ship. Like, it's not just a bunch of red shirts. Like, it is so great to see. I absolutely love it. That's my pick.
Yeah, I've never seen it. Graham, have you ever seen Lower Decks?
haven't either.
I
And
I
this is
like
the thing, man. You got to give it a try. Like, if you're out there and you're like, I've never seen it, please go watch it. It is so good.
I like the concept because like it is always the same like command crew. It reminds me there's an episode of Deep Space Nine. This is not my answer, by the way, but there's an episode of Deep Space Nine called "Take Me Out to the Hollow Suite" where Cisco it just plays baseball against this Vulcan captain, and I like it's he just chooses his whole command staff to be his team, but it makes no sense that he never just like, you know, he's like, oh, I hear that Ensign Riley, was on an Earth baseball team and had, bats, 1,200. I don't know how baseball works, but like, it's always the same 6 to 8 people in everything.
Voyager. Like it's always like, oh,
Voyager,
there's like this random car floating in space. Guess who knows about that? Tom Paris. What? Well, like nobody
Voyager,
else on the crew.
Voyager does have an ensign though, and he stays an ensign the whole time.
He's always an ensign. Poor Harry Kim. His promotion was going up from playing the clarinet to playing the saxophone.
Yeah, yes, that is true. That's his only character development.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, that makes sense. I'll check it out. It sounds like a decent way to kill a few hours if you're a Star Trek fan. So yeah. Graham, what do you think is the most underrated Star Trek project out there?
I feel a little bad saying this because I haven't seen the series all the way through, and I know the ending is super divisive. But I'm going to say Star Trek Enterprise.
Okay.
Because I know the temporal Cold War stuff gets really bonkers and out there. I know that that's probably not what a lot of fans were hoping for with a prequel series set before the founding of the Federation. I think a lot of the stuff outside of the temporal Cold War is really, really cool. You see humanity getting out into space. You see how transporters were like not useful at all in the beginning. There was, I think in the pilot, and it comes back a couple times in the first season, there's a spot in the deck where the anti-gravity doesn't work. So people are just like floating on the ceiling. There's some fun stuff about seeing the history of the United Earth post First Contact, but pre-Federation. That's really, really cool. And it scratches an itch in my history brain. Like, I love lore for franchises and stuff like that. That's just how my brain works. So seeing that acted out is really cool. I really like Archer. I think he's a better captain than people give him credit for.
Oh yeah, Scott Bakula from Quantum Leap. Yeah, I'm there. I love Quantum Leap. So yeah,
I think he's a good captain. I think he makes a lot of good choices. And there are some episodes that rival the heights of DS9 to me, like with the moral complexity and stuff. Very few, not a whole lot of them, but I think it's really cool to see that from the series that is kind of regarded as, oh, temporal Cold War. It's too complicated. There's too much weird stuff. Why are there alien Nazis in the last season? That doesn't make any sense. Why was it all a holo simulation? Like all of that stuff is like bad. Yeah, I agree. That's all bad. But the good stuff in the series is underrated because it's thrown down by everything else.
Yeah, it's not my favorite, but it is hated on a lot.
Yeah.
My favorite thing about like the structure of the show and the concept is that throughout all of the rest of Star Trek, like Vulcans are our friends and our buddies and stuff. But at the beginning of Enterprise, like humans hate Vulcans. Yeah, because they've been like holding humanity back technology wise, and people are very ticked off about it. And there's not a lot of trust, and it feels a little bit like Cold War, like post World War II Europe, where like a lot of there was mistrust even on the Western side of Europe, in between countries, going up against the Soviet Union, all this kind of stuff. I'm there. Dan, what do you think of Star Trek Enterprise? This is a divisive one. So
okay, so first off, I do not hate the ending. I get and I don't understand why people do. It's fine. Who cares? It doesn't mean that the whole show is a holodeck simulation. It just means that it was a fun way to put Jonathan Frakes in it as Commander Riker. I don't hate that at all. I know that people are like, oh, I want to see the speech and da-da-da-da-da. And like, you know what? Maybe if there was another season, they would have done that. I think they would have had, I think that, they've talked about like their plans to have Shran join and like actually do some stuff with the United Federation of Planets. Oh, well, we didn't get it. that's fine. I think it's still a fine series finale. It's not the worst series finale in Star Trek history. That's probably the original series when, Kirk switches place with a woman who's going to be captain, and it's very sexist.
Turnabout Intruder. That's the name of that episode. Oh,
thank you.
boy,
Yes.
is it a piece of crap. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So, Nate, what is your pick for the most underrated Star Trek?
My pick, before I say what I'm about to say about the most underrated Star Trek, you have to promise me that we will never, like, we got to keep our real names and addresses and everything like down on security. Like, people will kill me, right?
Okay. All
right, cool. My most underrated Star Trek that exists is Star Trek the Motion Picture, from 1979. Gentlemen, yes, it is incredibly flawed. Yes, it is so in need of fixing that it was our first ever Fix It episode of all time. But I rewatched it after we did that episode. It was on TV, and I don't know. I got more out of it this time, and the thematic building of it works really well. The last act of that movie is really strong. I think it's stronger than people give it credit for. And the idea of this machine creature looking for its creator is great. Am I biased because of all of the old NASA crap in there? Yes, I am. You can see the map of the moon behind me right here. But I have recently, I think, gained an appreciation for the motion picture that I previously didn't have. It's still not even like top 5 Star Trek movies, and I would not show it to someone first. I would like, if I was introducing like my significant other to Star Trek, I would start with everything else and then be like, hey, there's this one. I really like it. But yeah, it's Star Trek the Motion Picture is the most underrated. Gentlemen, you may now kill me. What do you think?
I agree with you.
Silence?
It is a very underrated movie. And just like when we talked about that episode, the twist of Voyager as V'ger is it's for me up there with some of the best twists in cinema history. That's absolutely fantastic. And you have to give it credit for everything that came after, because it was years between the original series ending. And yes, you had the animated series show in between there for a little while, but years before anything else happened, and it came out and brought this whole franchise back to life. Everything can trace its roots back to that. Everything, all the new shows that they're making, Discovery and Strange New Worlds and Prodigy and the Lower Decks, and everything can trace its roots back to that film doing well. So yeah, I totally get it. It is very underrated. Mr. Graham?
You could just disagree with me, buddy. That's okay. That's
1 and 2, but then he made a good argument.
No, that's fair.
No, I mean, I have no love for this movie at all. I want to, like, everything Dan said makes me want to love it, from like the fact that this is the Genesis, which is ironic because it's not the thing with the Genesis weapon. Of all the Star Trek that came since then, it's the reason that my favorite Star Trek things exist. By proxy, basically. I want to like the Voyager twist. To me, it feels so. It has Star Trek people, but it has never felt Star Trek to me, if that makes sense. It doesn't, minus like the fact that there is an Enterprise on the screen. It doesn't look like Star Trek or feel like Star Trek. It doesn't feel like the movies that came after, or look or feel like the shows before. Like, it's just kind of its own thing. And that, granted, it's because they were getting new footing. They were trying to figure stuff out. They wanted it to be different. All of that. But if you told me George Lucas directed it, I'd believe you.
Okay. Yeah, you're gonna clip that. Just and right there. That's Wow. No, that's fair. It's like
You're right,
there
though.
are
It does
missteps.
not
There are
look
missteps.
or feel like Star Trek. It looks and feels like its own thing, and yeah, that is very fair to say. Very
I
fair.
think
No.
I think it's one of, and I've used this explanation for some, or this comparison for other stuff before. If it wasn't in a franchise, it would be like a mediocre sci-fi film. I think it's weighed down because the Star Trek name is tacked onto it. You know, it's my same argument
Yeah.
for one of the most divisive Star Wars films, which Nate has heard me talk about ad nauseum. It's
Oh,
my argument
yes.
for eight.
Yeah.
For eight,
Yeah. Which Dan hasn't
um,
seen. We'll go through that later, but I'm with you. I'm with you with this argument. I still think it's underrated. I don't think it's as bad as everyone else says. It's
yeah,
certainly not top anything
which
though.
is fair. Like you can, again, there's an asset. You have more of a connection to it than I can.
I guess.
So like
And
that's yeah,
no, that makes sense because your pick is Enterprise because of the sort of, it's not alternate history, it's like future history stuff because you're the history guy. I'm the NASA guy, and of
yeah,
course I like the one with the NASA probe in it. But yeah.
And I'm funny.
Yes. Yes, you are. Good job. Um, hey, that's the end of our discussion about the best place to start in Star Trek. This episode went pretty long, so long that I've grown a full beard. Now I look like William Riker after season 3 of TNG.
Most underrated Star Trek thing. What did we get right? What did we get wrong? I know we didn't talk about Strange New Worlds. It's rated super highly. Oh well. Please stay tuned because we are going to be talking about the best thing to watch if you like Star Trek that's not Star Trek and give you some great recommendations. Stay tuned.